Hi everyone. The first talk covered the decoding issues that underlie spelling and comprehension difficulties. This one focuses on dealing with multisyllabic words. Now, decoding breaks down for a great many older students as words get longer. If a student comes across an unfamiliar word in their reading and cannot figure it out quickly and effortlessly, most will not bother. I don't know that word, so I'll just skip it. But it is likely to be the most important word in the sentence. If they do take the time to work it out, slowly and laboriously, it will interrupt comprehension. But most new vocabulary comes from reading, so developing the skills required is crucial. Decoding is about matching the word on the page to its pronunciation, matching print to speech. For most students, not all, this can be done letter by letter for very short words. There is simply too much to hold in memory as words get longer. These words need to be broken into manageable chunks. There are two options: the units of speech, the syllables. Figure these out and add them up, or analyze the patterns of print and put these together. Start with speech units and match to print, or start with print units and match to speech. Now, syllables, the natural units of speech, are easy to blend. It is the obvious place to start with young beginner readers. It works for the words they are dealing with, common words of a couple of syllables, maybe three. They are mostly dealing with words in their oral vocabulary. Happy, happy. If they get close to the correct pronunciation, they can fix it up to match a known word. This word might be decoded as money, but I can very quickly figure out that it's supposed to be money. E. I've got that one locked in my memory. And this one, behind. I can see someone's hiding over there, so it must be behind. B-E-H-I-N-D. I got that one sorted. I am out of my depth dealing with early junior literacy, but I know that this is a standard evidence-based process recommended by specialists and early reading scientists. But it becomes cognitively demanding and hopelessly unreliable for multisyllabic words with complex suffixes, especially words that are not in the student's oral vocabulary. There is too much to hold in the student's head. There are too many possible pronunciations of the vowel sounds. Look at the I's in here. Again. I over here. E here. Part of a sh sound here. And again, part of a sh sound here. And then it can be a y sound in words like opinion. To figure out these words, students must graduate from the patterns of speech to the patterns of print. Look at that word pronunciation, 6 syllables long. If I try the syllable route, I first have to figure out if this is pro or pron, and then this bit, is it un or un or un, and then this bit, ci. Is this as in city or sh as in special? Is it sigh or sh or shy or she? And as I am stumped trying to figure that out, I have very possibly lost track of what I'm supposed to be remembering back here. But if I start at the other end with the suffix, the shun, it all becomes clear. I know that shun. And this A has to be an A, and it will be the primary stress in the word. with that shun suffix, it always is. Once I have noticed this a few times, it becomes lodged in my head as a repeating pattern. I expect it to be the same next time. This is what our pattern-seeking brains naturally do. Know Asian for one word, and I know it for about 3,000 others. Education, compensation, calculation, indication. Go back from that to this I, and I see that it has to be pronounced E. I have seen I followed by Asian before, and it has always been an E sound. Affiliation, abbreviation, retaliation, variation. It always is. That makes the CI pronounced C. Ciation has just one possible pronunciation with the primary stress on the A. Then I see this UNS sequence here. It may be in different syllables, but it tells me that this has to be an A. The A vowel followed by two consonants is almost always A, regardless of what sound the C is making. Uncle, punctual, function, and a great many other words. Decoding these more complex and longer words is not about syllables or individual bits. It is about patterns and how those patterns work together. It is about students becoming attuned to these patterns and moving on from thinking in syllables. These syllables here on the left take a little effort to analyse following the syllable types, but are easy to blend. But these bits, RAS, SEM, may not be common to many words, and then the suffixes are masked. This looks like bly to me, and this looks like bled. But these components over here belong in many words. EMB sequence, whether it's in one syllable or two, is always EMB. Know it for one, and you know it for a great many. EMB is always EMB. And these suffixes have a known meaning, and also this prefix. This ASS is going to be S. Here it is again, S with a soft S sound. The blending takes a little more effort, but once these components are familiar, identifying them is effortless. There is one principle that runs through all strands of the language, the role of the double consonant. This principle, along with many other spelling conventions, was established about 500 years ago when the printing press became widely used and consistent spelling became important. These conventions, of course, reflect the pronunciation of the time. Back then, a distinction was made between long consonants, perceptibly lengthened, that followed short vowels, and short consonants that followed long vowels. By short vowels, I mean e, o, a, and o, the vowel sounds in pat, pet, pit, pot, put, and put. And these over here, the long vowel sounds, a, e, I, o, U. These long consonants were represented by doubling. Double B for the long B sound, rubber. Double Z for the long Z sound, diz-e. The variants CK, DG, and TCH were all long consonants, all indicating a short vowel. The distinction between long and short consonants may have been lost in modern English, but we're left with a double consonant indicating a short vowel sound. So here we've got two T's, has to be an A, latter. One T, probably an A, later. Two T's, I. One T, I, bitter, biter. Bonny, bony. Two T's, dotted. One T, doted. CK, backer, baker. Two L's, bellow. One, below. Two D's, rudder. One, ruder. And you can see that in this word, two C's has to be an A. Two M's has to be an O. One D, probably an O. One T, probably an A. And that applies even when there is an E on the end of a word, like these words, serviette, croquette, finesse. This is also tied up with stress patterns, the doubling applying to stressed vowels, so it does not mean that a single consonant cannot follow a short vowel sound. It is very much a one-way system. English is not a rule-based language, and I do not generally find rules helpful, but this one is critical. Words have a structure. Words are made up of subunits that mix and match. 2-year-olds can isolate prefixes and suffixes, understand that they carry meaning. How many 2-year-olds have you heard saying gooder, knowing that this is a unit of meaning, meaning more, and I've heard it in other words, and now I'm applying it here. And I can do that before I know the word better. Bestest, I runded fastly. This child knows that ed suffix and what it means. They know that ly suffix and what it means before they know the word ran. And once kids have a sense of rhyme, they can split words into what's called onset and rhyme. The onset being the consonant or consonant cluster at the beginning of a syllable, and the rhyme unit, spelt like that, being the bit that starts with the vowel. So if that child starts school knowing that at and that and mat and flat all rhyme and can hear that, and then there's that same at there, two T's to keep it as an at, if they can understand that sense of cat and that and mat all rhyming, they already know that basic structure of words. So the suffixes and prefixes, these onsets and rhymes, are the essence of the structure of words, and many students, possibly most, understand that before they start school. And this is how it works. I look at this word frog and I split it into fr and og, and this word bl and ok. And then I can mix and match. I can take this fr and add it to ok and get frock. I can take this bl and add it to og to get blog. If I start with sl, I can get slog. Slog's not a word. Sleigh, slug, sling, slip, slight, sleep, slope, all the way down to slate. And start here with br, and I can get bring and bright and so on. The other thing that I notice here, that these rhyme units here are quite regular. IGHT, T goes with IGH. There are no IGHB or IGHK words. This EAD is not always, but nearly always, ed, bread, spread, instead, ready, dreadful, and so on. Whereas this EAM, apart from dreamt, is always going to be eam. And that's an important principle. These rhymes are regularly pronounced even if they are in different syllables. EMB is always em. UST is always ust. Imp, all of these down to ound, they're always the same, and many others as well. Even these ones, ENT is always going to be an E, even when ENT, that T is part of a shun, pretension, or this S is part of a sh, comprehension. Still, it's always going to be an E. Compassion, always going to be an A, with or without that shun. Action, always going to be an A. Production, always going to be an A. Description, always going to be an I. This has the same effect as the long consonant. Does not apply in every case, but in these and many others, it always does. And now I've got my consonant cluster, the onset. I've got my rhyme unit, the bit that starts with the vowel, and a simple suffix. And now I've got my onset, the consonant or consonant cluster at the beginning, then the bit that starts with the vowel, the rhyme unit, and then a suffix. And I can mix and match these. I can go b, it, in. I can go sk, at, and fl, op, e, and r, it, and b, ot, o, and so on. These words work with syllable division as well. These words are a bit more complex. So now we've got a prefix. We've got the consonant cluster, the bit that starts with the vowel, some other bits that also start with the vowel. So we've got two of these units and a suffix. Now here I have added the vowel that comes before the shun, here I have added in the vowel that becomes before the shun. The shun is the suffix, but this chunk is really regular. There are two words, national and rational, where this doesn't apply, but then there is only one letter before the Asian. UTION, always Ution, always, no exceptions. USION is always Usian with a J, no exceptions. USSION is always Ashen, always, no exceptions. And the stress is always here. But if you've got a word ending with ULA, the stress will be back here. It always is. Spectacular, particular, triangular, and so on. With an ibble, the stress is going to be back here. When it ends at 8, the stress is going to be back here, and so on. Here, OR is the suffix, meaning a thing or a person that does something, but that chunk, ATOR, about half the roundabout of the words with that suffix are ator. And when you get that, the stress is going to be back here. It always is. Commentator, navigator, decontaminator, generator, defibrillator. It's always the same. Those stress patterns are consistent. These are the sorts of words that really stump kids when they get to secondary school. These are the same words analysed into the patterns. I am looking at the suffix first because that tells me where the stress pattern is going to fall and how the rest of the word is going to work. So let's look at these yellow ones. We've got isity, acity, osity, and they're all going to be the same. Acity again, osity again, acity again, isity, isity. And down here, where is it? Osity here. Always the same pronunciation, always the stress falling on that vowel before the city. Always the same. And then these shus words, sometimes with a TI making the sh sound, sometimes with the CI making the sh sound. But we've got ishes, ishes, oshes, ishes, ishes, oshes, ishes, aushus, ashes, always the same. Oshus, ashes, inches, aushus. Just one possible pronunciation for these parts, all with the stress on the preceding vowel, on the bit that becomes before the shus. And then we've got these green ones. Inchul, 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 anchul, ishul, inchul, ishul again, urshul. Always the same, with the stress on that vowel that comes before the sh. Then I notice these double consonants. Double P here has to be an A. Double F here has to be an O. Double F here has to be an I. Double M has to be an O. And then the rhyme units. Here, ENT has to be an ent. IST has to be an ist. Might be in two syllables, but that has to be an I. And over here, I've got ECC has to be an E. ENT has to be an ent. To figure those out, I'm splitting the word before that vowel, before that vowel, before that vowel. I do have to be careful to get the difference between I making a vowel and I being part of a consonant, like here. So for here, for instance, I don't split it there, I split it there, because this is part of the sh sound. This one is the vowel. And then I can go there and there. I'm also noticing the CE, so that is making a s sound. And I'm also noticing this lonely A here before that initial blend. And when I get that, that is always going to be an A sound. When A is a syllable by itself, it always makes A. So it's a process of analysing this way, going backwards, and then blending forwards. Get skilled at this, and this analysis can happen in a second or less. And it needs to become as quick and effortless as that. It just takes practice. The spelling, furthermore, the spelling of these words helps me figure out the meaning. This is pronounced differential, but I can see the spelling of different in it. And that gives me a very strong clue to its meaning. This is existential, but I can see exist in it. Here I can see finance. Here, pronounced provincial, but I can see province. I can see suppose. I can see consequence. And I can see authentic. And then when I come to these two words, that OCI pattern has a very different pronunciation. Here it's ossa, here it's osh. But the spelling pattern, if I know what this one means, gives me a clue to the meaning of that one. A little bit of help from context, and it's possible to infer a probable meaning of many of these words. Now, splitting those words, I'm just looking for the patterns which may overlap. Here, I've got that shun suffix, which tells me this is going to be a noun. But I can also see that Asian chunk. I can see here, I can see that double L telling me that's an I. I can see that UST sequence telling me this has to be an A, but I also see that str. And I also see that illustrate part, which tells me what the word might mean. Here I've got that all suffix, meaning a thing or person that does something. But here I've got that larger chunk, which is consistent. Here I've got that ACC that tells me that that's going to make an A sound. I can also see the CE, and I can see that this is to do with accelerating. Students may succeed with syllable analysis for some time, but the pattern recognition skills students need to instantly decode these more complex words takes time to develop and needs to be automatic and instinctive before they reach the intermediate and secondary level. So my plea to teachers in the middle and upper primary years is to take the long view. It is, of course, valid to ask if this 8-year-old student has the skills required to succeed at an 8-year-old level, and syllable division might be enough. But please also ask if this student is on the route to success at secondary school. Are the skills they will need then starting to develop now? They may be skilled at recognizing the syllables, but are they also developing pattern recognition skills?